This is VOA News via remote. I'm Tommy McNeil. The bomb cyclone hitting North America cannot derail NORAD, which is the U.S. military agency known for tracking Santa. AP correspondent Julie Walker.
1,500 volunteers are working on Christmas Eve to field phone calls from children who want to know Santa's location and delivery schedule. Lieutenant General David Nahom.
Up in the North Pole, it's even chillier, so I think Santa will be right at home with the Arctic weather that's hitting the lower 48.
If you're curious how they track Santa, the most famous reindeer plays a big role.
He's got a Rudolph in the front with a red nose that gives us a little bit of heat, and we have some infrared heat-seeking technology that can pick that up as well.
NORAD's holiday tradition began in 1955 after a child mistakenly called a Colorado military command asking to speak to Santa. I'm Julie Walker.
Russian shells pummeled the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson on Saturday, killing at least 10 people, injuring 55 more in a city that Moscow's troops were forced to abandon last month. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, just back from his quick trip to Washington, posted photos of the wreckage on his social media accounts. He noted the destruction came as Ukrainians were beginning Christmas celebrations. The Taliban government on Saturday ordered all foreign and domestic non-governmental groups in Afghanistan to suspend employing women, allegedly because some female employees did not wear the Islamic headscarf correctly. They also separately banned women from attending the religious classes at the mosque in the city of Kabul. The bans are the latest restrictive moves by Afghanistan's new rulers against women's rights and freedoms, coming just days after the Taliban banned female students from attending universities across the country. This is VOA News. The flu is beginning to wane in many areas of the United States after a brutal start to the season. AP correspondent Mike Hempen.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says hospital admissions fell for the second week in a row, and the percentage of doctor's office visits due to fever and other flu-like symptoms has dropped for 3 weeks in a row. Officials say they have seen some decline in most parts of the country, but the flu is still spreading. CDC data indicate flu activity last week was high or very high in 45 states. The CDC estimates there have been at least 190,000 hospitalizations and 12,000 deaths from the flu so far this season. I'm Mike Hempen.
Kurdish activists, left-wing politicians, and anti-racism groups have been holding a protest in Paris after 3 people were killed at a Kurdish cultural center a day earlier. Authorities say the attack was aimed at foreigners. Shooting is in a bustling neighborhood of central Paris also wounded 3 people. It stirred up concerns about hate crimes at a time where the far-right voices have gained prominence in France and around Europe. In recent years, a suspected attacker was wounded and is in custody. He is a 69-year-old man who was charged last year with attacking migrants and was released earlier this month. Pele's family gathers at a hospital in Brazil. AP correspondent Shelley Adler.
Family members of Brazilian soccer great Pele are gathered at a hospital in São Paulo, where the 82-year-old has been since the end of last month. Doctors said earlier this week that Pele's cancer had advanced, adding the 3-time World Cup winner is under elevated care related to kidney and cardiac dysfunctions. The superstar led Brazil to victory in the 1958, 62, and 70 World Cups. He remains one of the team's all-time leading scorers. I'm Shelley Adler.
As China grapples with its first ever national COVID-19 wave, emergency wards in small cities and towns southwest of Beijing are overwhelmed. Intensive care units are turning away ambulances. Relatives of sick people are searching for open beds, and patients are slumped on benches in hospital corridors and lying on floors with a lack of beds. Even as the young go back to work and lines at fever clinics shrink, many of the elderly in one area are falling into critical condition as they overrun ICUs and funeral homes. It could be a harbinger of what's to come for the rest of China. More at voanews.com. Via remote, I'm Tommy McNeil, VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Steve Karish. 3 non-governmental organizations say they will stop working in Afghanistan because of the Taliban's ban on female staff. In a statement, Save the Children, CARE, and the Norwegian Refugee Council said, while we gain clarity on this announcement, we are suspending our program demanding that men and women can equally continue our life-saving assistance in Afghanistan. On Saturday, the Taliban ordered domestic and international NGOs to immediately ban female staff from coming to work. It's the latest Taliban crackdown on women's access to public life. At least 17 weather-related deaths have been confirmed across 8 U.S. states, as heavy snow, howling winds, and dangerously frigid temperatures kept much of the nation frozen for a third straight day. The National Weather Service warned of lethal conditions and urged residents in affected areas to remain indoors. On Friday, it said wind chills had sent temperatures plunging to negative 48 degrees Celsius. Canadian authorities have also issued severe weather warnings. Hundreds of thousands were left without electricity in Ontario and Quebec provinces. Christian worshippers packed a Christmas morning service in the West Bank town of Bethlehem, revered as the traditional birthplace of Jesus. Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, led the service, attended by locals as well as Christian pilgrims from around the world. From Washington, you are listening to VOA News. The death toll from a fuel tanker explosion in Boksburg, South Africa, a city east of Johannesburg, has risen to 15, the health minister said Sunday. The tanker, transporting liquefied petroleum gas, was caught beneath a bridge close to a hospital and houses on Saturday morning. The minister said 3 hospital employees, 2 nurses and a driver died from severe burn injuries. 37 people were injured, including 24 patients and 13 staff members who were in the hospital at the time of the blast. Videos on social media showed a huge fireball under the bridge, which the tanker appeared to have been too high to go under. As we round out 2022, WHO's Director General takes a look at where we stand as it pertains to various health crises. More from VOA's Lisa Schlein.
WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus gave a grim assessment of the many health challenges and threats people around the world have faced this year. Topping the list was the COVID-19 pandemic, which has sickened and killed millions of people for a third year. He noted a global outbreak of monkeypox, now known as Mpox, an Ebola outbreak in Uganda, and cholera outbreaks in multiple countries as other health crises. He said these emergencies were compounded by wars in Ethiopia and Ukraine, as well as climate disasters, including drought and flooding in the Greater Horn of Africa and the Sahel, and flooding in Pakistan. And yet, as 2022 draws to a close, he said there were many reasons for hope. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
Family members visited the legendary soccer star Pele on Saturday at the Sao Paulo hospital, where he is suffering from worsening cancer and kidney and heart problems. This according to a social media post by his daughter. Shelley Adler has the details.
Family members of Brazilian soccer great Pele are gathered at a hospital in São Paulo, where the 82-year-old has been since the end of last month. Doctors said earlier this week that Pele's cancer had advanced, adding the 3-time World Cup winner is under elevated care related to kidney and cardiac dysfunctions. The superstar led Brazil to victory in the 1958, 62, and 70 World Cups. He remains one of the team's all-time leading scorers. I'm Shelley Adler.
Ukrainians usually celebrate Christmas on January 7th, as do Russians. Not this year, however, at least not all of them. Some Orthodox Ukrainians have decided to observe Christmas on December 25th, like many Christians around the world. From Washington, I'm Steve Karish, VOA News.
This is Encounter.
This is VOA News. I'm Steve Karish. The Islamic State terror group claimed responsibility for an attack Monday that killed 6 fighters affiliated with U.S.-backed security forces. One of the 2 attackers was also killed. Local officials say the attack targeted a security headquarters in the city of Raqqa, which was the de facto capital of IS until 2017, when U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces removed the militant group. North Korea flew at least 5 small drones into South Korean airspace Monday. VOA's Bill Gallo has the story from Seoul.
South Korea scrambled fighter jets and helicopters in response to the North Korean drone incursion. Though South Korea's military fired about 100 shots, it says it failed to bring down any of the drones. South Korean officials say one of the drones returned to North Korea, but they lost track of the others. South Korean military official Lee Sung-oh said Seoul responded by sending its own unmanned aircraft on a reconnaissance mission into North Korea. He vowed thorough and firm responses to future North Korean provocations. One of the South Korean aircraft involved in the response crashed east of Seoul, though officials haven't explained why. Neither pilot in the plane was injured, officials said. North Korea has steadily ramped up tensions this year, launching a record-high number of missiles and conducting artillery shelling in sensitive border areas. Bill Gallo, VOA News, Seoul, South Korea.
A key international highway in Serbia remains closed, along with schools and public institutions in the country's east, after a freight train carrying ammonia derailed. The resulting gas leak sickened dozens of people in the area near the border with Bulgaria. Authorities say an investigation is underway to determine what caused the accident. You're listening to VOA News. On Monday, the acting head of the UN assistance mission in Afghanistan urged the Taliban to reverse its ban on the employment of women by non-governmental organizations, saying that millions of Afghans need humanitarian assistance and removing barriers is vital. David Wright is Chief Operating Officer at Save the Children International.
It really is a grave situation, and particularly when it comes to the stabilization centers. But of course, as I say, we're in the middle of winter. There's cases of pneumonia that need treating. So ultimately, if this is not resolved within a week or so, children are going to start dying as a result of this decision.
At least 4 foreign NGOs have announced a suspension of services in Afghanistan in response to the ban, including Save the Children, the Norwegian Refugee Council, CARE International, and the International Rescue Committee. 71 Chinese Air Force aircraft, including fighter jets, entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone in the past 24 hours, the island's government said on Monday. It's the largest reported incursion to date as Beijing continues military activities close to the Chinese-claimed island. China said it's conducted the drills in the sea and airspace around Taiwan on Sunday in response to what it said was provocation from the democratically governed island and the United States. Ethiopian officials have, for the first time in nearly 2 years, arrived in Tigray's capital, Mekelle, to join in overseeing implementation of a November peace deal. Mohammed Yusuf reports from VOA's Africa News Center in Nairobi.
The delegation are in Tigray to work on implementing an African Union brokered peace deal to end the deadly 2-year conflict. The visit will be seen as a sign that the peace deal is holding. Ethiopia has gradually lifted a blockade on desperately needed food and medical aid to Tigray and restored some telecommunications. The 2-year conflict is estimated to have killed hundreds of thousands of people and displaced millions. But information is hard to verify in Tigray, and Ethiopia has also blocked journalists from entering the region. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi.
11 people were killed and 19 others missing after a week's worth of heavy rain in southern and eastern parts of the Philippines. The flooding hit on Sunday, with the disaster ruining celebrations on the mainly Catholic nation's most important holiday. Rivers overflowed, swamping rural villages and highways, as well as the cities of Osmaziz and Orqueta. For more on these and other top stories, visit us online at voanews.com. I'm Steve Karish, VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Russia's foreign minister on Tuesday warned Ukraine it must demilitarize, threatening further military action and falsely accusing Kyiv and the West of fueling the war that started with Moscow's invasion. AP correspondent Karen Chalmers reports.
Sergei Lavrov said Ukraine must remove any military threat to Russia. Otherwise, he said, the Russian army will solve the issue. He also insisted Ukraine and the West were responsible for the 10-month war, which has killed tens of thousands of people and displaced millions. Lavrov reiterated that the West was feeding the war in Ukraine to weaken Russia and said that it was up to Kyiv and Washington how long the conflict will last. In an apparent reaction, Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak tweeted that Russia needs to face the reality. I'm Karen Chamas.
President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday delivered Russia's long-awaited response to a Western price cap, signing a decree that bans the supply of crude oil and oil products from February 1st for 5 months to nations that abide by the cap. VOA's Steve Karish has more.
The group of 7 major powers, the EU and Australia, agreed this month to a $60 per barrel price cap on Russian seaborne crude because of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The decree includes a clause that allows for Putin to overrule the ban in special cases. Steve Karish, VOA News, Washington.
Serbs have erected more roadblocks in northern Kosovo and defied international demands to remove those placed earlier. The move on Tuesday came a day after Serbia put its troops near the border on a high level of combat readiness. The new barriers made of heavily loaded trucks were put up on Tuesday. Find more on our website, voanews.com. This is VOA News. U.S. military police, along with state patrols, will keep people from driving in parts of western New York, where more than 30 people died in what's being called the worst snowstorm the region has ever seen. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
Erie County reports most of those deaths in Buffalo. Executive Mark Poloncarz says too many people are ignoring the driving ban in Buffalo, making it difficult, if not impossible, for emergency vehicles.
People are trying to drive around in little Honda Civics.
Poloncarz says at the height of the storm, when snow was 4 feet and drifts were even higher, emergency crews could not reach some in need. There were resulting deaths, many found in cars and snowbanks. Meanwhile, President Biden has approved an emergency declaration clearing the way for federal disaster funding. Julie Walker, New York.
Spain on Tuesday announced a new series of measures, including scrapping value-added tax on staple foods such as bread and milk, and is extending rent and eviction controls to help ease the economic crisis caused by Russia's war in Ukraine.
Son más de 35.000 millones de euros a los cuales se tienen que sumar.
Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced the measures in an end-of-year speech, given the cost of living, energy, and food. A Brazilian official said Tuesday President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's inauguration will be secured by 100% of the Capital District Police Force amid widespread fears of violence. Over the weekend, a man was arrested after allegedly placing explosives in a fuel truck near Brasilia's airport, hoping to sow chaos ahead of the inauguration Sunday. The device did not explode. Lula backers have expressed fear on social media of riots or attacks on Inauguration Day, with hundreds of thousands of people expected to attend events in Brasilia. U.S. Representative-elect George Santos, a New York Republican who this week acknowledged lying about his education and employment history while running for Congress, faced fresh criticism on Tuesday over his claims of Jewish heritage. The Republican Jewish Coalition said Santos would not be welcome at the group's future events after misleading its members about his ties to their faith. Santos has vowed to serve out his 2-year term in Congress, and House Republican leaders have been silent about the controversy. Santos told the New York Post, quote, "I am Catholic. Because I learned my maternal family had a Jewish background, I said I was Jew-ish." Find more on our website, voanews.com. I'm Joe Ramsey.